Yeah, so if we're going to look at the first team, you know them, you love them. It's our Toronto Maple Leafs. They finished the year 35-14-7, first in the division. They were a great team all year. They had 51% Corsi force, so 51% of the shot attempts. They had a 55% expected goals, good for second in the league. They created high danger chances at a 57% rate, again, good for second in the league. They were a good shooting team, which is what we would expect from the Toronto Maple Leafs with the high end talent they have. They shot 9.74%, which was third in the league. So the Leafs are who we thought they were. They're a dominant team in this division. They pretty much led it from end to end. And, they had their ups and downs throughout the year, but come on, this is a great team.
Yeah, and I think a lot of those ups and downs were very much related to goaltending issues. So with that being said, like if you take a look at these numbers, the Leafs are just an elite offensive team. Maybe their possession numbers aren't as high as some people maybe would like them to be, but at the same time, we've talked about it before. This is a team who probably sacrifices some of those chances from the outside and looks for those really high danger choices or chances, and that really reflects in the numbers with the high danger Corsi for the expected goals and stuff being top three in the league or top two in the league in those cases.
Absolutely. And one thing I really like about this Leafs team, too, is that they did not go into the playoffs on a lull. Now, sure, they lost their last two games. Nobody cared at all. But going in, I looked up all these stats before the Winnipeg game because I knew it would be just a pointless affair. It wouldn't matter. So the Leafs' previous 25 games to that, they were 16-4-5. So they only got better by winning percentage. Their Corsi was actually 52.5%. Again, they jumped up in that. 59% expected goals and 63% of the high danger chances. So not only are they a team that was dominant throughout the year, but they've gotten stronger as it's gone along, and it was easy to see throughout the year. Now, the Leafs, they were kind of on an upward trajectory all year. The Habs were they were a bit more of a roller coaster. Now, they started the year off. I don't know if anybody remembers, it was so long ago, but I believe they were referred to as juggernauts once or twice.
Yeah, I think that word was thrown around quite a bit. Now, those of you who maybe listened to the podcast or follow us on Twitter early on knew that we definitely did not think they were that good. Maybe they gave us a little bit of a scare, being like, "Oh, they're better than we thought they were." But then, as soon as that shooting percentage started to dip on the Habs and they stopped scoring goals at just an unrealistic rate, they sort of settled into what we definitely thought they were going to be on the season.
Yeah, going into the year, I kind of looked at the division as Toronto's clearly going to finish first, and shame on me. I thought Calgary might finish second, but then I saw Edmonton, Winnipeg, and Montreal as kind of the three teams that would be fighting for that last spot. So and Vancouver, but let's not even get into them. Now, they got off to that hot start, like you mentioned, and they were riding an insanely high shooting percentage, and everybody was a victim of the moment, and they just thought, okay, this Habs team is good. They get off to that hot start, and then they cool down a bit, and they fire Claude Julien because they're not scoring enough. And it's like, you look at their roster, why would they have been scoring? So with that said, let's look at their total record for the year. They were 24-21-11. Now, there's definitely a big asterisk with that because we know for the last half of the year, which we'll get into, they have had some injuries and they've had a compressed schedule. They are what they were last year as well. They were a 54.5% Corsi 4 team. So a team that generates a lot of shots. Now, their expected goals were only 53%, which is still, a very solid number, while their high danger chances were 52%, good for 11th in the league. So as you can see, this is a team that is very different from the Leafs in that they generate a higher quantity, but they don't bring the quality. If you look at even the expected goal stats that they've had last year, they were the same kind of team where if you just looked at only advanced stats and you looked at expected goals, you'd think, oh, this Habs team is amazing. They're so good at generating shots and controlling the play. But as we're going to see when we dive deeper, a lot of that boils down to just the fact that the Habs love ripping clappers from the point.
Yeah, this Habs team is definitely a bit of a stats padding team. Lots of the stuff is from the outside. You can see that every time they played the Leafs, or if you watch them play other teams in the North Division, like they really do try and generate their offense from the point, and then grit and grind it their way into the net. A lot of that I think is out of necessity for them because they don't quite have the shooting talent that a team like Toronto or Edmonton does. But I mean, at the same time, it makes them, I think, look a little bit better than they actually are on paper. Whereas when you look at their shooting percentage this year, even last year, they're just kind of a middle of the road team.
Yeah, they do bring, obviously, like we said, they bring that high quantity of shots, but this year they only shot 7.5%, which was 25th in the league, and that is exactly what I would have predicted before the year. A high possession team, but a team that is not as good as their numbers make them look, because they're not going to, you can't say, if the Leafs are shooting low, if the Leafs are shooting 7.5%, you say, there's something up with that. They're not a 25th overall in the league shooting percentage kind of team. The Habs, you look at their roster, it's easy to see why. They just do. They have guys like Toffoli who are good, solid players, but they don't have that elite level talent like an Austin Matthews, a Mitch Marner, a William Nylander. So they're obviously not going to be able to convert at a rate as high as the Leafs. Now, I'm looking right now at their heat maps from HockeyViz, which shows the areas that teams generate their shot. And if you look at the Habs shot chart, it is just a thick red heat map right at the blue line, because that's where they love to rip shots. But then if you look in the more dangerous areas, the front of the net, it's very blue. Obviously, they're not getting as many shots from right in front of the net. Whereas if you go to the Leafs, it is just a big sea of red right in front of the net, because the Leafs are so good at getting to that net front, creating high danger chances. And then the Leafs on the points, they don't take point shots. The only place that really they pepper a fair amount of shots from the point is right through the center of the ice, which is where we all know is the most dangerous shot to take from the point. So it's a very interesting stylistic comparison between these two teams, and it's going to be cool to see how it plays out in the series.
Yeah, I think that stylistic difference is a good point to bring up because I know you and me have talked over the kind of end of the season here and said who's our least favorite playoff matchup versus the Leafs, and the answer always came up the Habs, and that's not because we think the Habs are a great team or anything like that. It's just they're very different to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Whereas if you look at Edmonton or Winnipeg, they're built very similar to the Leafs. They're just like downgraded version of Toronto, whereas the Habs just do stuff completely different. They don't have that high end talent. They're obviously, a point shot team, quality over quantity or quantity over quality. And it's just one of those matchups where if the Leafs get into a matchup where they're facing a team who's just a downgraded version of them, the chances of them winning are just a little bit higher. But when they do face a team that is a little bit different, like the Habs, I just feel like there's a little bit more room for something to go wrong. Now, with that being said, we're not bringing any loser energy. I don't think anything's going to go wrong, especially the way the Habs finished the season. And since their coaching change, they've just gotten a lot less scary to me. So I'm not worried about it. It's just, I think that is a big kind of important thing to point out and maybe look at.
The Habs play style puts an emphasis on the Leafs goaltending. It Not that it has to be spectacular, but you just cannot have those crippling backbreaking goals, because they're going to pepper shots at Jack Campbell and, God forbid, Fred Anderson. And it's going to be important that those guys can stop the easy shots, that they stop the ones that they need to save, because the Habs are going to generate a high quantity of those. And it's going to come down. It's this series. I think a lot of it, we'll get into it a lot deeper later, but a lot of it is going to come down to the goaltending. Now, I do want to continue to talk about the Habs as a whole lately. I feel like we mentioned it was a roller coaster. I almost feel like they're the most underrated, overrated team ever. And by that, I mean, they were so overrated at the start of the year. Everybody thought, I saw people predicting them to go to the Cup finals. I saw people predicting them to win the division even before the season. And I couldn't fathom it. I had no idea why. And now you look around and you see a lot of people talking about what a terrible team they are and how the Leafs shouldn't be scared at all. And Lebda and I, we don't subscribe to that, because as we've said, they do provide those good possession numbers. And if you look at their season in three segments, the Claude Julien segment, the Dominique Ducharme segment, and then the last segment of the year without Brendan Gallagher, there's some very different segments with this team. They could be a completely different team come playoff time if they're healthy, because if you look at their stats with Claude Julien, they were 9-5-4, 55% Corsi, 57% expected goals, 58% of the high danger chances, all first in the league. So they were what we talked about, that team that can just generate such a high majority of the chances. And then when they hired Ducharme, it was kind of more of the same. Their record was very similar. Their expected goals, they dropped to fourth. They dropped to fifth in high danger chances, but they were still generating them at a high level. But as soon as Brendan Gallagher left the lineup, that team just went into the dumps. They've been 15, 16, and 7 over the course of the entirety of Ducharme's tenure, and that is including an 8-4-5 stretch with Brendan Gallagher. So they have been 5 games below 500 without him. Their high danger chances have dropped to 18th in the league. Their expected goals have dropped to 13th. So you can see that they are heavily reliant on Brendan Gallagher.
This is a bit of a tough one for me because they definitely have some reliance on Brendan Gallagher. Brendan Gallagher is a really good hockey player, and he definitely drives the boat for them. But at the same time, it's hard for me to just pin this on one player being missing from Montreal's lineup. I think a lot of it does have to maybe do with Ducharme slowly working his way into that lineup as well. Claude Julien is an elite coach when it comes to possession or generating shots and stuff like that. Like that's what Claude Julien teams do. So I think we are seeing some effect of Brandon Gallagher being out. He definitely is their best player. But I think also we're seeing, Ducharme coming in and just over time, more practices, he's influencing his style a little bit more. It's just not as effective for the Montreal Canadiens.
That could be a valid point. There's a lot of factors that could have gone into their decline in numbers. So we talked about Gallagher's injury, Ducharme. Now another factor could just be because they had that COVID break for a week there. They've been playing a really condensed schedule. They've been playing 4 games a week for the past month or two, and you can see that it's taken a toll on them. And then to compound matters, they have had other injuries as well. Weber has been out. Dano missed a little time at the end there with a concussion. Carey Price has been out. Josh Anderson, I think, has been nursing something. We'll get into him later. But it's just, yeah, it's hard to imagine that one player is such an impact that he's controlling that all. And I don't think he is controlling that all, but I think it is pretty clear to see that they're going as far as Brendan Gallagher takes them.
Yeah, and if we want to even expand on as far as Brendan Gallagher takes them, basically as far as that first line takes them, because I think that's where their reliance comes, and the replacement on that first line for Brendan Gallagher just can't keep up, and that was a very effective line for Montreal. I will say this: I think maybe missing Jonathan Drouin as well has an impact on this team. That's 2 of their top 6 forwards out. I mean, they're not, Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner missing from a lineup, but at the same time, when you don't have that replacement level talent and you're, to bring up into that top 6, like it does make things tough on Montreal.